I arrived late. It wasn't intentional. I'd meant to be on time. Hell, I even left early. But somewhere between forgetting where I placed my keys and getting turned around twice on a private mountain road with no signage, the funeral had already started by the time I reached the villa. The place looked like something out of a magazine. White tint glowing against the overcast Colorado sky, polished wooden chairs arranged in neat rows like someone had measured them with a ruler, heaters tucked into corners to keep guests warm in the mid-April chill. I stood there for a second, taking it all in, trying to decide whether I should even slip in or wait until the final prayer. Then I saw her. Savannah, my wife. She was seated toward the front, second row, her legs crossed at the ankle, hands clasped together in her lap, with that unnatural stillness she always adopted in formal settings. Her hair was pinned into a low bun. Minimal jewelry. A black wool coat cinched at the waist. Perfectly composed. Like the grief had been choreographed. There was an empty seat next to her. Reserved. Obviously for me. A folded program lay across the seat, clean and untouched. She hadn't moved it. She hadn't told anyone to fill it. I wasn't that late. Maybe 10 minutes. But it was enough to make a statement. I slipped quietly into a row behind her. She didn't turn around. She didn't even glance. The priest was saying something about legacy and grace, but I couldn't focus. My eyes kept flicking toward her shoulder, the angle of her chin, the way she occasionally sniffed but didn't cry. No trembling. No makeup ruined. She wasn't devastated. She was detached. This was her father's funeral, and I couldn't tell if she was heartbroken or just bored. After the closing hymn and the final blessing, people began to rise. I watched her stand, hug a few people, cousins, maybe, murmur polite thanks to an elderly woman in pearls who must have been a family friend. Then she made her way toward the gravel path that led to the parking area. That's when I moved. I called out her name once, softly, not loud enough to make a scene, but enough for her to hear. She paused for maybe half a second. Then she kept walking, straight toward a black SUV idling near the edge of the lot. The back door opened before she reached it. She slid inside without hesitation. The driver, a man I didn't recognize, wore sunglasses, dark suit, clean-shaven. Too formal for a funeral, but not out of place. He didn't look at me, just shut the door behind her and pulled away. I stood there, hands in my pockets, like someone who'd just missed the bus. I didn't follow. I didn't even try. By the time I got home that night, the silence between us had already stretched into something heavier than an argument. I expected her to be home by then, but the house was dark. No note, no text, just the coat rack beside the door, half full, and the faint smell of lavender detergent that always lingered after she did laundry. Her Berg *NDY wool coat was slung over the hook crookedly, like she'd come home in a hurry and didn't bother to straighten it. I reached for it out of habit, meaning to hang it properly. That's when something slipped from the inside pocket. A small white square. A parking stub. At first, I thought it was old. Maybe from a shopping trip or an appointment. But when I turned it over, my stomach tightened. Hotel Elmridge, Springsville, CO. Date, April 11th, 3 days ago. Time in, 7:12 p.m. M. Room, 302. On the back, in smudged pen, was a name. Not hers. Not mine. 2 initials and a surname. R. Park. I stared at it for a long time. Springsville wasn't far, maybe 40 minutes south. But it wasn't near her office. It wasn't near her mother's house either, where she claimed she'd stayed that exact night to help declutter the guest room. My first instinct was to make an excuse for her. Some perfectly reasonable explanation. Maybe she'd parked at the hotel to visit someone nearby. Maybe it was business. Maybe the room wasn't for her. But the handwriting wasn't hers. And I knew her handwriting like I knew my own. I slipped the stub into my wallet and waited for her to come home. She did, eventually. A little past 11 p.m., with a reusable shopping bag in hand and a tired look that felt more performed than earned. I was sitting at the dining room table, nursing a half-finished drink I didn't remember pouring. She blinked when she saw me. "You're still up?" I held up the stub. "You left this in your coat." She didn't even flinch. She just walked past me and dropped her bag on the kitchen counter. "Oh, that," she said with a small laugh. "Yeah, we had to use the conference room at the Elmridge for a last-minute meeting. I think someone else booked it under their name. R. Park, probably. I didn't stay overnight or anything." She was so calm, so rehearsed. I didn't say anything right away. I just watched her unpack groceries, almond milk, quinoa, a bottle of red I'd never seen her drink before. Everything she did looked intentional, like she was waiting for me to accuse her of something just so she could act offended. Your mom's house is nowhere near Springsville, I said finally. She shrugged. I stopped there on the way back. I told you. She needed help sorting old boxes. I just didn't want to cancel on work last minute. You said you spent the night. I did, she replied, turning around to face me. I got there late, but I stayed until morning. Why are you acting like this? It was just a parking stub. She looked tired, but not guilty, frustrated, but not defensive, and I hated that I couldn't tell whether I was being paranoid or perceptive. I didn't push it. I just nodded, slipped the stub back into my wallet, and changed the subject. But that night, lying in bed next to her while she scrolled mindlessly through her phone, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the seat at the funeral, the one that had been left empty, and I wondered when I'd stop being expected. After that night, everything I thought I knew about my marriage stopped feeling solid. The hotel stub was the kind of thing I might have brushed off a year ago. Savannah was sharp, successful, and always had a dozen things on her plate. I'd learned early on that trying to keep up with her schedule was like trying to catch smoke with your hands. But after the funeral, after she looked right through me like I was furniture, something shifted. I started noticing things I hadn't before. Or maybe I had noticed them and just chose not to care. It started with her time. She was late more often than not. Not just 10 or 15 minutes, but hours. One night she claimed she had a work dinner. Shouldn't be more than an hour, she said. I made dinner. Waited. Reheated it. By the time she walked in, it was nearly 10:30 p.m. I asked how the dinner went, and she said, "What dinner?" Then laughed like I was being dramatic. Maybe she didn't realize she'd already told me. Maybe she did and didn't care. Then there were the clothes. Savannah's wardrobe had always been clean and classic. Navy blazers, black dresses, sensible heels. But lately I was noticing new pieces. Trendy, expensive, and oddly revealing for someone who once said she didn't believe in dressing for attention. I found tags in the trash from brands I'd only heard about in passing, high-end boutiques that didn't carry anything under $300. But I never saw her wear any of it around me. One day, I was taking out the laundry, and I noticed a blouse I'd never seen before. Crimson silk, faint perfume, something floral but sharp. She hadn't worn that scent in years. I asked if it was new. She smiled, said she picked it up for a fundraiser dinner. The thing is, I wasn't invited to any fundraiser. When I asked which one, she waved it off. Just a client thing. Everything was a client thing. When I suggested we have dinner, just the two of us, no distractions, she said she'd love to, but her calendar was packed through next week. I checked her calendar when she left her tablet open on the counter. It was blank. Not just empty. Wiped. All her meetings, events, color-coded tags, all gone. I opened her browser. No saved passwords. No history. I knew then that something was very wrong. But even then, I wasn't looking for proof of an affair. I was looking for reassurance. Something, anything, that would tell me I was wrong. That the late nights and lies and hotel stubs were some puzzle with a rational explanation. Instead, I kept finding more cracks. One afternoon, I came home early from work. I walked into the kitchen and saw 2 wine glasses in the dishwasher. One had lipstick around the rim. The other didn't. Neither were from the night before. I'd gone to bed early, and she told me she hadn't touched a drop. I waited for her to come home. When she did, I asked her who came over. She blinked, then said, "My sister. You know, Kayla." She stopped by for like 20 minutes. I didn't argue. Just nodded. Too bad I missed her. She didn't respond. Just pulled her phone from her purse and retreated to the bedroom. I called Kayla the next day, casually brought up her visit. Kayla paused. "What visit?" I didn't press. I just said, "Must have been another night." Her phone, by then, was practically glued to her hand. At night, it stayed under her pillow. When she showered, it came with her into the bathroom. When it buzzed, she tilted the screen away before answering. She started setting it to silent during dinner, something she used to roll her eyes at when her coworkers did it. Now it was her default. The real shift came on a Thursday. She came home late, really late. Nearly 5 a.m. I heard the door open and the clack of her heels on the floorboards. She tiptoed through the house like she didn't want to wake anyone, like she was sneaking back into someone else's home. I was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the dark. She jumped when she saw me. "Jesus," You scared me, she said, clutching her chest like I'd committed a crime. Where were you? She blinked. I told you. I was staying at Sasha's place. We had wine, and I passed out on her couch. My phone died. Sasha, her friend from grad school. I hadn't heard that name in months. I nodded slowly, said nothing. She tried to laugh it off, walked into the bathroom, and shut the door. The moment it clicked shut, I heard her phone buzz. She picked it up mid-ring and whispered, "Can I call you back?" That's when I started keeping notes. Not to confront her. Not yet. Just to make sense of it all. April 14th, wine glasses and dishwasher. Claimed Kayla came over. Kayla says she didn't. April 17th, Berg * NDY code, hotel stub, Springsville, room 302. R. Park. April 22nd, comes home 4:51 a.m. Says stayed at Sasha's. Phone allegedly dead. Heard her on call at 5:03 a.m. Whispered voice. Male? It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was pattern recognition. One night, I opened her briefcase when she left it near the hallway closet. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed something. Inside were receipts from a salon she never mentioned. A spa I didn't know she visited. A gift box tucked into a corner. Empty, but with a tag that read, "For you." R. That name again. R. Every explanation she offered seemed to exist just long enough to redirect my attention. Like sleight of hand. But once you start watching for the trick, you stop falling for it. She started carrying a second phone. Not openly. But one night, I heard it vibrate in her purse, even though her regular phone was on the charger. She said it was a backup for work. Something her firm gave her in case of emergencies. 2 weeks later, I saw her using it in the driveway, talking in a hushed tone with her back to the house. When I stepped outside, she clicked it off and smiled like nothing happened. I was just talking to my mom. I nodded. On the backup phone, she froze. Just for a beat. Then shrugged. She called the wrong one. Everything she did was just close enough to normal that I couldn't accuse her of anything concrete. But every detail chipped away at the version of her I thought I knew. One night, I woke up and saw her standing in the living room, staring out the window. The house was dark. She was backlit by the glow of her phone screen, just holding it like she was waiting. I watched her from the staircase. She didn't move for 10 minutes. Eventually, she typed something. I couldn't see the screen, but her face shifted when she hit send, like something in her chest had unknotted. Then she turned off the screen and slipped back into bed like nothing happened. She didn't know I was watching. I didn't ask. I was done asking. I was done hoping she'd tell me the truth if I just asked the right question. I wasn't looking for confession anymore. I was looking for confirmation. And deep down, I knew the truth was coming. I just didn't know how much of it I was ready to see. I always thought I'd know the moment it became real. That the truth would arrive like a slap or a scream or some cinematic betrayal you couldn't miss. But the moment I knew, it came from a receipt. A line item on our bank statement. I wasn't even looking for it, not actively. I was reviewing our credit charges, something I did every couple months to keep an eye on spending. Normally, it was the usual suspects, groceries, gas, the occasional online splurge Savannah would make when a sale popped up. But then I saw it. Bramlin House, $387. 20, April 19th. Bramlin House is a restaurant. A fancy one. The kind that doesn't list prices on the menu and requires a reservation weeks in advance. We'd eaten there once, on our 5th anniversary. It was special. Expensive. The kind of place you go with someone, not alone. But what caught my attention wasn't just the charge. It was the duplicate. Same date. Same amount. Same restaurant. 2 charges. I frowned, checked the timestamps. One was 8:03 p.m. The other was 8:07. There was no reason the restaurant would have run her card twice unless she'd used it twice. 2 cards. 2 bills. 2 people. I stared at the screen for a long time, the cursor blinking like it was mocking me. I called the restaurant the next morning under the pretense of confirming a reservation for an upcoming dinner. Actually, I said casually, can you remind me who handled the table for 2 last Thursday around 8 p.m.? The name should be Savannah. The woman on the phone hummed thoughtfully. Savannah. Yes. She was here. Table for 2 on the patio. Let me pull the name. It looks like she was with a guest under Park, Robert Park. Robert. R. Park. My stomach dropped. Do you recall what they ordered? I asked, trying to keep my tone light, conversational. She chuckled. You must be planning to surprise her. She ordered the roasted duck and a bottle of the 2018 Rosella's Pinot. Great choice. I remember because she specifically asked about the vineyard. Really charming couple. Couple. I hung up after thanking her, my hand trembling slightly as I set the phone down. Savannah hated Pinot. At least, she did with me. Said it tasted like regret in a wine glass. We'd fought about it once. One of those stupid spats during a weekend getaway to Aspen. Now she was asking about vintages like some sommelier's apprentice. That night, I went down a rabbit hole. I searched the restaurant's location tag on Instagram, filtering posts by date. At first, nothing. A few selfies, a plate of oysters, a cocktail with a sparkler in it. Then I saw it. A group photo taken by someone I didn't know. 3 women smiling into the camera on the patio, glasses raised, golden light spilling across the table. And in the background, barely noticeable, just out of focus, was Savannah, sitting across from a man. Her hand was extended over the table, touching his. I clicked the profile. The woman who posted the photo was tagged at a birthday dinner. There was no mention of Savannah, but the date lined up. The time lined up. The location, angle, and chairs, all of it. And the man? I couldn't see much. A side profile, short dark hair, clean cut. But it was him. The same man who drove her away from the funeral. That was the moment it all collapsed. All the hints, all the carefully folded lies, all the gaps in her stories, they didn't fall apart at once. They unraveled like a pulled thread. I sat there for what felt like hours, watching the video on loop. Her hand on his, her posture leaning forward, her face soft in a way it hadn't been with me in months. And it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some drunken slip at a conference or a one-night lapse of judgment. This was routine. Savannah wasn't falling apart. She was moving on. I was just too slow to notice she'd left. I started checking more statements. Hotel charges. Coffee shops nowhere near her office. Spa services under unfamiliar names. Everything lined up when I mapped it. Springsville, Branlin House. The hotel stay with room 302. All in a tight radius. Each one explained away in the moment. But now, it formed a constellation. A pattern. And at the center was Robert Park. I pulled out the stub again. The one from her coat. The room number. His name. Her lie. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the couch in the dark, piecing together the new reality from fragments of the old one. By morning, I had my answer. The affair wasn't just real, it was established. And I wasn't just a man being cheated on. I was a man being quietly replaced. The next time she came home late, I didn't say a word. I watched as she dropped her keys on the table, kicked off her shoes, and yawned like she'd had a long, exhausting day. She poured herself a glass of water and asked if we needed groceries. I told her we were fine. I smiled. I said nothing. Because I needed time. Time to understand what this meant. Time to decide if I was going to confront her, or if I was going to wait and see how far she'd go. Time to figure out why. Not just who, not just when, but what part of her had looked at me and seen something. Disposable. The following weekend, she said she was going to a conference. 2 nights. A resort up north. She packed a suitcase full of clothes I'd never seen her wear before. A matching set of luggage, tags still on. I nodded. Have a good time. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek. And I watched her leave. 30 minutes later, I called the resort. No one named Savannah was checked in. No Robert Park, either. But a suite had been reserved under Parker R. Check-in for 2, dinner included. I booked a separate room under my name. I didn't show up. I didn't need to. I knew. I just wanted to see if she'd even bother to lie about it when she got home. She did. Long panels, she said, tossing her heels in the closet. So boring. You would have hated it. She poured herself a glass of that same Pinot, swirling it gently before taking a sip. That night, as I lay beside her, I realized something colder than betrayal had settled in me. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was preparing. Because it wasn't just the cheating. It was the way she'd made me question my own instincts. The way she'd manufactured silence around her deceit. The ease with which she could lie and make me feel crazy for doubting her. I wasn't going to confront her in the way she expected. I wasn't going to scream or beg or ask her to explain herself again. I was going to gather everything. Because she had removed me from her life so gradually, so strategically, that I needed to understand the full scope of what she thought I didn't see. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. And now, finally, I had it. I hadn't planned to attend the reading of her father's will. Not because I didn't care. Despite everything that had unraveled between Savannah and me, her father, Gregory Ellison, had always been decent to me. A little cold, sure. Meticulous, but decent. The kind of man who saw life as a ledger and people as lines of value, assets or liabilities, depending on the season. Still, I respected him. Or at least I used to. But I didn't want to be there for the spectacle. Savannah hadn't spoken to me much after the conference trip. The lies were smoother now, less adorned. Like she wasn't even trying to convince me anymore. She'd moved into autopilot, responding just enough to keep the wheels turning while whatever life she was building with Robert Park hummed along in the background. As for me, I was silent, composed, waiting. Then came the call. Mr. Ellison listed you as a named party, the attorney said over the phone. We'd like you present at the formal reading. You'll need to be in Seattle by Thursday morning. I almost laughed. Are you sure? That doesn't make sense. But he was sure. Your name is written explicitly, not as a witness, as a beneficiary. I didn't tell Savannah I was coming. When I walked into the law firm's downtown office, she was already seated at the end of a long mahogany table. Gray slacks, fitted blouse, low bun. She looked like a woman ready to inherit an empire. She didn't react when she saw me, didn't even blink. Just nodded once, almost like I was a colleague showing up late to a board meeting. Her mother was there too. Her father's lawyer, of course. A couple of advisors. No one else. We sat in silence as the executor began. First, the house. The cars. Personal effects. He mentioned art, bonds, and a vineyard I didn't even know the Ellisons owned. Then came the estate, the bulk of it. Savannah leaned forward, just slightly. And now, regarding the primary distribution of Mr. Gregory Ellison's estate, the lawyer said, eyes scanning the page. It is written here that Savannah Ellison, daughter of the deceased, is to receive a sum of $100,000. Her expression didn't change. Not immediately. She blinked once, then twice. That wasn't just less than she expected, it was less than he gave to the groundskeeper in his preliminary estate notes. A pause. The lawyer cleared his throat. This sum is given without residual claim to property or holdings and is subject to the non-contestation clause, which will be read shortly. Then he looked directly at me. The remainder of Mr. Ellison's estate, including properties, investments, and financial holdings, is to be transferred in full to, he glanced at me again, Matthew S. Ellison. That is, the legal name recorded through marriage documentation. My full name. My legal name. I heard a small intake of breath from across the table. Savannah's fingers, which had been still, now clenched slowly around the edge of her chair. She didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead like the words hadn't landed. But her body betrayed her. Her posture, stiff. Her jaw tight. I said nothing. I didn't flinch. I just kept my eyes on the papers. The lawyer continued. The will includes a clause, explicitly marked as Amendment C, which states that any challenge to the distribution of the estate by the aforementioned Savannah Ellison will result in immediate forfeiture of her stated inheritance, redirecting it to a named list of nonprofit beneficiaries. Savannah spoke for the first time. I'd like to see the document, she said. Her voice was thin but sharp, controlled, but barely. You'll be given a full copy, the lawyer said evenly. It is on record and has been notarized multiple times, witnessed and confirmed by the trust's co-executors. Her eyes flicked to me then, briefly, not with rage, with calculation, like she was assessing me, trying to decode whether this was a fluke or a plot I'd orchestrated behind her back. It wasn't. I hadn't spoken to her father in over a year. Our last interaction was a brief handshake at a charity event where he told me to take care of the family name. And yet, here I was, apparently holding it in my hands. The lawyer continued. Mr. Ellison specified that the inheritance is not to be viewed as reward or punishment, but rather as the execution of judgment made in accordance with his private observations. He stated clearly that conditions outlined under Amendment C are binding and irrevocable. Silence followed. Savannah's mother shifted uncomfortably. The rest of us sat in stillness. Then, slowly, deliberately, Savannah reached for her water glass, took a measured sip, and said, I'll be reviewing this with my own counsel. Of course, the lawyer said. But I must remind you that contesting the will, under the parameters of the clause, will terminate your entitlement entirely. She nodded once, then looked at me again, longer this time. Something about her expression was off. Not disbelief. Not even anger. It was recognition. Like something she'd feared might happen had just stepped into the light. After the meeting, people filed out. The air was thick with polite tension, the kind you find in high-stakes business negotiations. Savannah stayed seated. I stayed too. Finally, she said, "You didn't know about this." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "No," I replied. "I didn't." Her eyes narrowed. "But you're not surprised." "I'm surprised he didn't leave you more," I said honestly. "But I'm not surprised he left you with less." Her mouth twitched, but she didn't respond. Instead, she stood and walked to the far window. The Seattle skyline glinted through the glass. A mirror of high-rises and fog. "I was supposed to be the one in charge of the trust," she said, almost to herself. "He promised me that after the acquisition closed." "Which acquisition?" She turned, lips parted, then closed her mouth like she realized she'd said too much. We stared at each other for a beat too long. Then she straightened her jacket, grabbed her purse, and said, "This isn't over." I didn't argue. I just watched her leave. That night, back at the hotel, I didn't celebrate. I didn't drink or call anyone or look at the zeros in the balance sheet the lawyer had emailed over. I just sat there, staring out the window, wondering how long Gregory Ellison had known. Had he seen what I hadn't? Had he witnessed her slipping away from me while I was still trying to hold things together? Or had she already betrayed him too? Because leaving everything to me, that wasn't an accident. That was a decision. And I needed to understand why. The envelope came 3 days later. No return address. No handwriting. Just a plain white envelope slipped between bills and credit card offers, wedged so tightly in the mailbox I nearly missed it. The only thing that stood out was the weight. Heavier than a single page, but not bulky. I opened it in the kitchen. One piece of paper. No signature. No salutation. Just a single line typed in bold, center-aligned, as if whoever sent it didn't care about being subtle. Look into what she tried to erase. That was it. No name. No contact info. Just that cryptic sentence staring up at me from the countertop, while Savannah hummed to herself upstairs, folding laundry like we were still married in every way that mattered. I sat with it for hours. Thought about throwing it away. Thought about confronting her. But the words stuck in my mind like a splinter, what she tried to erase. Erase what? She'd been trying to erase me, sure. From our marriage. From her future. But this felt more specific. Tactical. Like someone knew something I didn't. Something she didn't think I'd find. And I still had access to her father's estate files. The lawyer had given me temporary access credentials to the digital archive, a sprawling database of scanned documents, handwritten notes, letters, legal agreements, amendments. Most were dull. Tax returns. Real estate holdings. Trust agreements buried in legalese. But then I searched for keywords. Savannah. Amendment. Disqualification. One result blinked on screen. Subject. Request for clause review. Amendment C. It was a printed email, not just stored digitally, as if someone, her father, had considered it important enough to keep a hard copy. The email came from Savannah, dated just 3 weeks before Gregory Ellison died. She had contacted the trust administrator directly, not through legal channels, not through her father. She bypassed them. Her message was polite, professional. She addressed it as a routine update, asked if there were any current plans to alter the disqualification terms listed under Amendment C, a clause that allowed the trustee to withhold inheritance in cases of coercion, ethical breach, or compromising influence. Then she pivoted. She didn't just ask about the clause. She requested its removal. Given the recent restructuring of the estate and my role in assisting with acquisitions and family transitions, she wrote, I recommend reevaluating the necessity of Amendment C, which appears outdated in light of current intentions. Current intentions, as in, intentions that had not yet been finalized. Intentions that she thought she could steer. The administrator's response was blunt. The clause would remain in place until Gregory himself ordered otherwise, which, apparently, he never did. So Savannah had tried to have it removed without his approval. She framed it as a recommendation, a clarification, but it was a setup. If the clause had been stripped, Gregory wouldn't have been able to legally disinherit her without triggering potential legal action. She had tried to take away his safety net before he ever used it. She didn't just want the estate. She wanted control over how she received it. She wanted it guaranteed. I printed the exchange and tucked it into a file with everything else: hotel stubs, bank records, restaurant charges, the Instagram photo. I wasn't building a case. Not yet. But I was collecting the pieces. Because whatever mask she still wore around the house, whatever charm she turned on like a faucet when I asked too many questions, I had seen underneath it now. The rot wasn't just marital. It was moral. She came home from yoga later that afternoon, flushed and glowing like someone who hadn't tried to erase her father's final wishes behind his back. She kissed me on the cheek as if we still shared secrets, as if we weren't living on opposite sides of a widening fault line. "You okay?" she asked, noticing how quiet I was. I nodded. "Just tired." She smiled, brushing my arm with her fingertips. "You need to get out of the house more. You've been stuck in your head lately." That almost made me laugh. Stuck in my head? No. I'd been living in hers. A maze of half-truths and manufactured narratives she assumed I was too slow or too passive to navigate. I was done with passivity. That night, I went back into the archives. Her father had labeled everything obsessively. He had folder structures for everything: business, legal, personal, Savannah. One subfolder was labeled Contingency Docs. It was locked behind a secondary access key. I didn't have it, but I had something better. A contact. Gregory's estate assistant, Danny, had worked with him for nearly 2 decades. I remembered her from parties, quiet, efficient, always 2 steps ahead of whatever conversation was happening. She wasn't a gatekeeper. She was a vault. I called her. "Matthew," she said, not missing a beat. "I figured I'd hear from you eventually. Did he tell you what was happening?" I asked. She paused. Then, he didn't have to. I explained the envelope, the email, the clause, her attempt to erase it. Danny sighed. He knew. He saw it coming. I told him she was maneuvering. He didn't want to believe it at first. Then she tried to go around him. That changed everything. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Why give it all to me?" "Because he trusted you to see her clearly when he no longer could." Silence stretched between us. Then Danny added, "Check the lower study. Behind the cabinet." He kept a physical backup of everything. Click. She hung up. The next morning, I drove to the estate in Springsville. The house was locked, but I had the keys from the trust. The lower study was cold, the air still thick with the scent of old cigars and aged wood. I moved the cabinet. Behind it, just like she said, was a metal file box. Inside, a flash drive, a sealed letter with my name on it.